morning's papers, and joining us to review them, the anthropologist Marianne Hotta and the presenter and writer Matthew Stadlen. Lovely to see you both. Happy Easter. I hope you've got your chocolate eggs, well, hidden away from me, thankfully. Let's start with you, Matthew, this morning, the front of the Sunday Telegraph. I mean, he picks his moments, the Archbishop of Canterbury, doesn't he? Tell us what exactly does he mean by the Rwandan plan is ungodly?
Yeah, he certainly does pick his moments. You'll remember he intervened, I think, in December in a Telegraph article asking politicians to put their arms up, put their hands up to admit law-breaking during the coronavirus lockdowns. Happy Easter to everyone. I think Boris Johnson, who's at Chequers this weekend, will be opening his Easter eggs rather tenderly today, because although his lockdown fines, which you might have expected still to be on the front pages of the papers today, and certainly would have been pre-Ukraine war, pre-Ukraine crisis, are not, but they're replaced instead by heavily critical articles about his, in many people's view, outrageous policy and Priti Patel's policy to send asylum seekers to the Central African country of Rwanda. And this intervention by the Archbishop, I think, plays particularly badly, given it's on the front page of the Telegraph, which of course is a conservative-leaning newspaper, also on the front page of the Observer, as we'll discover lately. But essentially what the Archbishop, Justin Welby, is saying is that this policy, which seems to send asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing, they won't then be able to come back if their asylum claims are accepted in Rwanda, but they will be able to settle there. He's saying it doesn't pass the test of godliness. It doesn't pass the test of responsibility expected of a country based in Christian laws such as the United Kingdom. So I think this will play very badly in the Tory homelands, and Boris Johnson might shudder as he opens his Easter eggs.
Yeah, I think he might. Marianne, before we move on to your story, I think it's worth getting your view in all of this. I mean, do you agree with Matthew that this is going to cause ructions in Conservative ranks, or are they just going to turn around and say exactly what Matthew said at the beginning? He's done this before, he's got form on it. Justin Welby can be somewhat dismissed as a political intervention rather than a man of God.
Well, I think fundamentally, Justin Welby this time is absolutely on the money and is sort of in tune with feelings within the British, within conversations. I was sitting in a cafe yesterday, overhearing the people next to me, and they were absolutely scathing of this policy. I don't know what colour of politics they normally, claim as their own, but they were absolutely basically appalled and slightly ashamed that ours, a great nation, once was, giving ourselves this enormous pat on the back because of the work that we're doing in Ukraine, opening our arms, isn't it wonderful? We're, the people who, we're the guardians of world affairs, and yet, on the other hand, we've got a Home Secretary who, it was revealed yesterday, kind of personally rubber-stamped this Rwanda plan. And I think we do need to extricate these two threads. One, are we just being racist about Rwanda? No. This is basically outsourcing any asylum or refugee claim to anywhere. I mean, whether we were sending them to Switzerland or Rwanda is sort of neither here nor there. But of course, you're asking a question of one of the other things that's raised as well is the idea that it's very likely that some of these people who might be sent on this one-way ticket to Rwanda would be children. Because if you turn up without papers, without any evidence or documentation of who you are, because you had to leave it behind, because you're a refugee, then you have this age assessment, and time again, children who are perhaps as young as 15 are assessed to be in their early 20s, and those young individuals will have absolutely no recourse in this system. They'll get put on that one-way ticket plane and then left to fend for themselves, and that is an absolute shirking of responsibility, whether you celebrate Easter or not.
Yeah, indeed. Matthew, we'll come back. Don't worry, we will come back to your story, Marianne, in just a second. But Matthew, take us to the front then of the Mirror. The orphans of the Rwandan genocide are going to be losing their home as part of the infrastructure build for this project.
Yeah, those who are watching this morning, Neil, who are our age, will remember bitterly what happened in 1994, the genocide in Rwanda, just quite unimaginable scenes of horror there. So those who lost parents would have been looked after in the aftermath in some form or other, you hope. Some of those have been housed in this sanctuary in Rwanda, and there will be probably 28, 29 now. But apparently, according to this report, some or all of them don't have other places to go, and they are quite literally being turfed out, being told to leave this place that they called home in order to accommodate some of these refugees that Priti Patel and Boris Johnson will be sending their way. I think it's important to make a couple of points here, by the way. One is that Rwanda, although a beautiful country, somewhere I've never been but would absolutely love to go at some point, it is not really a functioning democracy. I mean, the president has been in power, I think, for nearly 3 decades. He's accused by some of being, in effect, a dictator, crushing opposition. He stands accused of multiple human rights abuses. We are sending vulnerable people to somewhere that doesn't properly respect the rule of law. I should just also say, on the other side of the coin, that whether this scheme really ends up working, it is a serious question. Boris Johnson wants to appear tough on these people who are coming across in terribly dangerous conditions in the Channel. He wants to appear tough so that he can squash any threat politically from the right. But once these people have been screened, they will have 5 days in which to appeal. So it's not impossible that we won't see any people going across to Rwanda at all.
Yeah, I mean, we should also remember the fact that there's an awful lot of red meat in this policy for the Conservative base, and whilst the polling is a little bit all over the shop, people want something to be done about what's going on in the Channel. But let's return, shall we, Mary-Anne, to your story in the front of the Independent, and indeed, a story that, frankly, we've probably been discussing in a little bit more depth if all of this other stuff hadn't cropped up.
Yes, so this is the story that attaches to the picture, in fact, rather than the action for Ukrainian refugees. Although, ironically, isn't it funny that people are bending over backwards, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but people are bending over backwards to offer places to Ukrainian refugees, and at the same time, refugees from elsewhere in the world are being, happily shoved onto boats and planes to be got rid of. But this is actually the story above that. So PM being told to reveal details of the Sunak probe. So this is the independent advisor on ministerial interests, Angela Rayner, who has urged Boris Johnson to provide details of the time frame of the inquiry into Rishi Sunak's ministerial declarations. Now, Rishi Sunak had requested personally to be investigated so that everything that he has filed since becoming a minister in 2018 would be reviewed and determined whether it was appropriate or inappropriate, whether he missed anything out. And Boris Johnson, so Rishi Sunak asked for that himself in order to effectively draw a line under this or get some clarity. Boris Johnson agreed to that on Monday, but no further details have been provided. Now, depending on how cynical and conspiracy theorist you're feeling this morning, Neil, you can either say, well, this is because it serves Boris Johnson politically very well for everybody to still be poring over the integrity of Rishi Sunak, because that might mean they have a bit less effort and time to spend poring over his own integrity.
Sorry to interrupt, but just on this, I'm slightly confused. I don't think anyone was accusing the Chancellor of having broken the rules. They were just pointing out the fact that if you are Chancellor, having your wife, paying £30,000 a year to avoid paying tax on her overseas income doesn't look good.
Well, yes, that's true, but also the inquiry into his green card status. So there is that, but you're right, some of this would not fall within the scope of an inquiry into his ministerial declarations. So again, it's a kind of tool, I guess, for Sunak to have used to kind of say, look, I'm doing the right thing, I'm all above board, I've not done anything wrong, you, depending on which you, is it number 10 or is it a political opposition, who knows, maybe number 10 is the political opposition at this point. Whoever leaked this story, whoever fanned the flames in order to turn all eyes on Rishi Sunak and all wrath.
Yeah, maybe.
So whether it's in Number 10's interest to publish the details or to kind of leave it all a bit grey and sketchy around Sunak at this point, Bear in mind, we have not yet seen the full report from Sue Gray over all the Partygate scandals, because that has been held until all the fines are issued. So at each stage, I think trust and faith in our current government's ability to scrutinise their own affairs is ebbing lower.
Yeah, I think you might have a point there, Marianne. Matthew, take us to the front of the Sunday Express. Well, anyone who's been anywhere near social media must have surely seen that It's Cooking Oil clip about the protesters that accidentally targeted the wrong type of tanker. But the Express, playing to its readership, I mean, I suspect that the readers of the Express, and frankly a lot of other papers, want to see some kind of punishments coming for those participating in this disruption.
Yeah, the Sunday Express have got a poll in which I think they say just over 50% of people, so not quite everyone, as they sort of almost suggested in their opening paragraph, that everyone's had more than enough of these guys. But this poll suggests that more than 50% at least do want tougher laws to be imposed. We've got the Police and Policing Bill coming up very shortly. Although the Lords are trying their best to change that, and therefore it's been delayed, that may increase powers for the government to crack down on groups like Extinction Rebellion and these guys who are basically saying we've got to end oil now. There's, of course, a lot of frustration. I mean, I would just say, as a former LBC host on the radio, when it was quite difficult to make the environment sound sexy, to make the environment the sort of subject that would get people to call in, I feel passionately about it. When Extinction Rebellion were doing their thing, we had to talk about it. You'll know that as a Sky News presenter.
I do. I also know that I've got 10 seconds left in the programme, Matthew, so I'm going to have to leave you and Marianne there. We'll see you for more in the next hour. Stay exactly where you are. Coming up after the break, we will return to the debate over the words from the Archbishop of Canterbury.